Trump being elected by himself isn't enough. He can't get very much done outside of executive order unless we tackle the idea of the Senate and Congress. And I have before me somebody running for Congress in a district that desperately needs better. Um, it is the 20th congressional district?
21.
21. Okay. I always get that mixed up. I'm consistent on that, though. I am joined by Michael Maher, a veteran, a business owner, an FBI agent. So I know he looks like maybe young enough he could be my kid. He's actually not quite as young as that. Has some impressive experience. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, why in the world would you do this? This is hard. I appreciate people stepping up, but why?
I'm doing this because not only was I asked to do this, but a lot of times in life you say, if not me, who? When I was in the military, you don't give up your watch until somebody relieves you of that duty. I'm married, I have kids, and we are looking at fundamental really ideals and ideas of what government is in this election. The Harris-Walz campaign, the Trump-Vance ticket, and we're seeing that through every level of government, really fundamental issues of, are we going to be a free society, or are we going to be a society that's controlled by Marxist ideology? And it seems almost hyperbolic to put it in those contexts, but that's really what's being discussed right now. And I'm running against a guy who's, this is his sixth decade in elected office. So
he's been around as long as Joe Biden.
He was actually working on the Hill in Washington, D.C. During Joe Biden's first elected term. So he's been there for a long time.
Yeah, almost.
Absolutely. He did not jump right to the federal side. He worked in the State House, Assembly, and Senate, and to the point where they even named a portion of the highway after him, typically signaling, hey, it's time to move on, let some other guys get in, pass the torch, which he actually called and said, hey, Joe, pass the torch. It's time for you to move on.
Meaning Joe Biden?
He told Joe Biden. He was one of the guys that signed up and said, hey, it's time for you to pass the torch. So I guess I put out a press release during the time saying, well, I guess it's he's conceding his race and is supporting me. And that's really the mantra that has damaged really a lot of lifetime politicians. The desire is for a new generation, new leadership, and it's experienced leadership. And you mentioned my age. I'm, early 40s, but I am in my 40s. I'm the child of the 80s, the early 80s, and I have a lifetime of experience, not as an elected politician, and I don't want to be a politician. I want to be a representative, a statesman that serves based on the principles of governance found in our Constitution. And that's what's the fun thing about being on your show.
So limited government.
Limited government.
A lot of people are like, well, I'm just not going to vote because, I have to pick the lesser of two evils. And I would point out that if they're a believer, there's only one person that could be on the ballot that would be perfect.
Right.
So we have an obligation, if you care about the future, if you care about your kids and the direction of this country, to vote. Why do you think so many people don't vote?
I think a lot of people have lost hope. They feel, what's the point? Why should I vote? It doesn't seem to matter, especially in California, where we are here in California. You have in the state legislative branch a super majority of Democrats. And so there's so much compromise on, well, I guess we'll work with the Democrat because if otherwise we can't get anything done. And I see that. But on the federal side, where I'm running, and Congressman Costa has been there for decades, is a difference. The Republicans have the majority, and it's a very slim majority, and we have to keep it. You mentioned President Trump winning the White House. If he does not have the Senate and the Congress behind him, it will be governing through executive order. And we saw what happened in his last administration. He governed and used executive orders, and when the Biden administration came in, with a stroke of a pen, they're able to cancel those executive orders.
Right. The only thing that was lasting was his tax cuts. Well, there's a little more, but the only really big thing was his tax cuts.
And some of the other things that he did that were working so well, they just don't talk about it and they just left it alone. And you have to have a Congress that's willing to provide legislation that will not only pass the House but get through the Senate and be able to be signed into law by the president. And there has to be people willing to work. And we saw in 2016, we had the Republican Congress, we had a Senate, and there was obstruction. There was no working together. And a lot of it had to do even with, I think, the lack of understanding at the time for where President Trump was. One, that he won, and then two, how large the federal bureaucracy is, and do you even have the people and the relationships to put in charge of these agencies, people that will actually be able to understand, manage, and be effective at controlling that bureaucracy.
He failed. I read an article, and it's now been long enough that I don't remember the number, except in this way. Obama had almost 3 times as many on day one. Lower level, not the head of the cabinet, because the Congress has to approve that, but the number 2 and the number 3 in the various cabinet positions. He had 3 times as many people ready to go on day one as Trump did. That makes a huge difference when the bureaucratic state decides so much. I want that to be pruned back because I want, as my elected representative, I want to be able to reach out to that person and say, why is this happening? What's going on? How can you make a difference in the lives of your constituents?
Well, and what is the role of Congress? It's not only to make laws; it's there to be provide oversight and accountability, and it does control the purse strings. And what we've seen is a growing bureaucracy, and really the Supreme Court ruling on Chevron deference was a huge ruling, and it really pushed back on some of the over control of the federal government, being able to say no. Just because it's the government saying it doesn't mean the courts have to agree with you right out. Your experts are now better than the experts of the business or individual that's trying to bring suit against the government. That's a big win. That's a huge win. But we have to have lawmakers who are willing to hold the bureaucracy accountable and provide oversight. And we have not seen that. And that takes a leader. That takes somebody who's going to stand up against it. And I feel very fortunate from my time in the military, my time with the U.S. Department of Justice, as an FBI special agent working under the Obama administration and the Trump administration, to see how those two administrations responded and how they were seen even by the federal bureaucracy that can just wait out presidencies and wait out administrations. And there needs to be changes, and there needs to be, frankly, a reduction on where we are right now with a $1.8 trillion deficit, that our interest is the most expensive thing that we're taxing on right now is government run amok and completely mismanaged.
So, assuming you're elected, how do you bring transparency and accountability to government? What do you do?
Well, I think this goes back to the first question that we asked. Why do people not vote? Why are they so disenfranchised and disheartened? When you look at a big problem, and these are major problems. I look at this in business. You can only take, I won't use the profanity, but when you're in the military or you're going into a situation, you go raid a home. The bad guys got guns. We have guns. We have training. Our superiority of training and tactics and choosing the time that we're going to go do that allows us to overcome the enemy. It's that training, and it's a big problem. They say it's a big sandwich, and the only way you eat it is one bite at a time. If we do that in voting, if we do that as a representative, I'm maintaining my focus and my responsibility first on my faith, and then family, and then on these items. I can focus on the roles and the responsibilities that I have. All those other things I'm going to have to pray and leave to God, but I'm going to do them to the best of my ability. And if we start doing that in voting, and we do that in the rest of the ways of our life, you have a responsibility to vote. Don't worry about what's happening in Georgia. It's bad. Don't worry about what's happening in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. Where you are in your district, what can you do? What do you have authority over? You have authority over your ballot, whether or not you're going to wake up in the morning and make your bed. how you're going to live your life, we start taking control of the things that we have responsibility over, you make change. And that's the same thing that goes for us. Should I be elected? Bring transparency and do it in the roles and the responsibilities that I have. And, if God gives me additional roles and responsibilities or advances me into different offices, I will have the ability to do it even more. Where you've been is often a very good path and trajectory of where you're going.
So what you're telling me, a large part of that is God is the moral compass that will lead you. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's not you go to church and then there's a separation between church and home? Or does it go out into the world? I jokingly say that because so many Christians don't vote.
A tremendous amount of the Christians don't vote. If the Christians did vote, I think there would be a massive change in this nation. And this is the thing, separation of church and state. There's so many conversations, but this was even a question during JFK when he was running on is he going to be, because he's Catholic, is the Pope really going to be in charge of this country or not? And it was a political attacks.
Right.
We all have, we should all have something that grounds us and is our fundamental compass. What is your true north? There's all these books and business of what's your true north. For me, I'm a Christian. I'm very open on my faith. But because of my Christianity is why I've been able to be involved in every single faith community in my district.
Non-Christian.
Absolutely.
I've been to some of those events.
And I'm open. I'm very open with, hey, I'm a Christian. I'm able to be here because I'm running not to be your pastor or your priest. I'm running to be your representative in government. And the First Amendment that we have is what? Freedom of speech and religion. And we're able to worship who we choose. Those are the things that if we get back and focused on what our Constitution has, which is a beautiful document, and allow the people to be educated in their rights and their freedoms, you have to have good moral people standing up for this republic, or we're not going to keep it. And that's what's happening. We've lost fundamental education in this country on what it means to be an American. What does it mean to actually have our rights? And we saw that during the pandemic. So many people, the government ran roughshod over the American people. And where were the leaders? No one stood up. But, there was people who stood up.
Not near enough. How's that?
Not near enough. Not in the churches, not in government. There was local counties. There was some churches that did stay open, that did push back. And that is what we need to see more of. And I think that really shook a lot of people in America. And they realized, who are these unelected bureaucrats? Who are these people that even are elected? It's time that we get engaged. It's time that we start taking our country back. And I think that's what's happening now. And it's not for any radical reasons. It's common sense. The electeds have not been managing our country. They put us in debt. They haven't solved our issues. And most of the issues that we're talking about have nothing to do with the party. They have to do with common sense, the cost of living, cost of electricity, cost of fuel, national security, sovereign nation, our borders, immigration. Let's deal with this in just common sense.
That's a refreshing thought. Now, your opponent, and I don't want to get into trashing him a whole lot. I'm not a fan. We're going to leave it at I'm not a fan in any way, shape, or form. He helped you make the news recently. I thought that was kind of fun. The Supreme Court, through the First Amendment, has ruled that you can even lie. I am not accusing you of that. I saw the commercial. I believe it's completely fair. But there's a whole lot of leeway, especially with political commentary. Like, politicians are supposed to be able to take more. And he decided to whine like a little baby about a commercial that I thought was very fair. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, and not just that. You have a lifetime Democrat politician who is trying to silence democracy. He won't debate me. He'll show up for town halls with all sorts of additional restrictions. The other congressmen in the district surrounding us, they'll debate.
So
Fox
you
News.
can't go find a debate of you guys?
There's no debates. There is no debates. He's never been willing to engage in a debate against me, period. We've had the news channels, all the broadcast TV stations have asked. I've agreed. He will not respond. The ones that are doing for all the other races, in this area. Fresno County, where we are, has 4 or 5 different congressional races, all in Fresno County. You have Tom McClintock, you have Vince Fong, you have Jim Costa, you have John Duarte.
Yeah, that's just 4.
Those 4. And then some of those broadcasts, as far as the way broadcast coverage is, it also picks up David Valadeo. And so in those races, they'll debate, they show up. We do not have a man who spent his entire life in politics willing to debate.
Well,
And then he's using lawyers, out-of-town lawyers, to try to threaten to sue me, my campaign, because I just took excerpts from his own interviews and from www.congress.gov, his own record. Times past that if people have ran against him, what have they done? They've put him in high heels. They've done all kinds of things that have garnered national attention. Mm-hmm. I quote, and I put information directly from him in his own interviews, and he flips out, because the reality is all I'm doing is saying, here's your record. The people in the district need to know your record, and it's a record of failure. It's a record of a lifetime politician who isn't delivering. The only thing he is delivering as a postman is he got a post office renamed and a stamp reauthorized. Those are give me bills. When you have a congressman who can't get anything passed, the party will allow you to do these little easy give me bills. So then there's some sort of legislation that they've done. Over the last 20 years, he's done 2 that have been passed.
That's fairly sad. Now, I assume his name is on some other bills that did get passed because they allowed him to put his name. But as far as authoring it himself,
he's
done nothing.
And that's the deal.
For all intents and purposes, I see that as near nothing.
There's congressmen who are, and he's a guy who rides the coattails of other people. I'll co-sponsor. I'll jump onto that. I'll jump onto that. We need leaders. We don't need people who are followers. And the ones that, as far as he sponsored, that have been signed into law, it's 2 bills, and anyone can go check that. And that's the gist of the commercial. I got a guy who's been in politics. When he first went to Washington, D.C. till today, 10 presidents have come and gone. That's fact, and they want to complain about that.
That's more than my lifetime.
It's more than most people's lifetimes. And people say, Mike, I think you're a little young to run. He had almost 20 years of elected service by the time he was my age.
Wow.
This is the difference of, I would have already had, well over 20 years of military service. I went in right after 9/11 and ultimately I got injured and medically retired, and I fought to get back in because I didn't get to leave on my terms. I didn't plan on getting injured on deployment, but I will still fight. I'll still engage. I'm thankful I ended up meeting my wife. I got a beautiful family out of it. God has opened so many different doors and really given me so many experiences that brings me to this time where I believe we'll win this election, and I'll be able to serve and actually lead and get things done and unite really our valley.
Well, I truly hope that happens. It bothers me that politicians seem to get in and they lose touch. He talks about how it's not true that he's brought all of this huge money to the valley. Well, if we look at the amount of population that represents, wouldn't we get 435 representatives? So he should get 1/435th of it. So he can talk about millions of dollars, but it doesn't represent getting the fair share, because there are legitimate things that Congress can do to help the valley. We've only got about a minute before we go to break. I don't know if that leaves enough time. You can either start on it, we can finish afterwards.
Well, what is equitable? And that's the thing is, Fresno, the city of Fresno, is the 5th largest city in the state of California, which is the 5th largest economy in the world. It is the 33rd largest city in the United States of America. And in that, we are woefully behind. And we have had a lackluster leadership here in the valley that has not really returned what we would want, and what is not only equal, but is what is equitable back for our valley and our constituents. Because we've been receiving less, other areas have been able to take from us. And it's time that we start standing up for ourselves.
Well, you would be a unified block if this happens. All of the Central Valley would be red, which means you would be a force to be reckoned with. We're going to go ahead and go to break. This is Eric Rollin. Oh, I don't need to say it. The call letter's there. You'd think I hadn't done this for 3 years. Sorry, folks. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens on social media. Please like, subscribe, share, comment. All of them matter. All of them help get the message out. And I do this because I believe in returning us to a constitutional government. And in a lot of ways, we've kind of lost that. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Congressional Candidate District 21, Michael Maher. This isn't the first time you've run. You've really stuck with it. I appreciate that. Candidates, especially when they're running for this big a position, we want to believe that anybody can just jump into it. But name recognition matters to people. And there's a lot of party politics. I'm very much on one side, but I happen to be a Republican. I'm a conservative because the Republican Party is the closest fit I've got. I believe that we should be committed to a set of ideals as opposed to a particular party. Who do you see as allies here? If you're elected, you're in the legislative branch. You're going to have to work with people. Who are your allies? Where can you potentially wield the levers of power and get some things done?
Well, so there's multiple allies and there's multiple battlefronts. And so there is local issues, there's national issues, and that's the difference is a U.S. representative, a congressman is the direct link between the constituents, the voters, the people in a district, and the federal government. Yes, U.S. senators are federal, but they're for the entire state. So if you want, who is your local representative? Who is representing the people of that district? There is multiple ways. Constituent services, what you are doing on helping, and I get contacted all the time as a military veteran. People are actually reaching out, and I've been able to help cut through some bureaucratic tape just as a candidate for some of the issues that people are having at the VA. There's individuals who are having issues at the Social Security Administration. There's individuals who have all sorts of challenges, even elected leaders, city managers, on how they work with the federal bureaucracy. And fortunately, having a background with the U.S. Department of Justice, being a former FBI special agent, working with state and local agencies, other federal agencies, has given me that experience and access. And even in the front of, as of senior executive fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, most of the classmates are all senior executives in the federal agencies.
So and you already have contacts, is what you're telling us.
I have a tremendous amount of contacts in the private sector and business, as well as the federal government. And to be able to focus on the issues and the people and not only focused on party. It's actually pretty infuriating when representatives, once you're elected, it's not, you shouldn't be only serving one group of people. You shouldn't weaponize the federal government to only serve the people that have elected you. We need to get back to government being by and for the people. And in that service to the, not just the local district, a congressman can help anyone from anywhere. It's knowing and understanding what the job is, how you actually move those levers of power, and how do you build teams and coalitions. We talked about in the last segment, the entire Central Valley will be Republican when we flip this seat. Mm-hmm. The state of California, and nationally, everyone knows the state of California and Gavin Newsom and his great hair, but horrible politics and the destruction of the state. He has, I think, below 40% popularity. The gentleman I'm running against has one of the worst approval rates of any congressman in the state of California. And with that, how do we actually bring the Central Valley that's mostly entirely red, that actually works and provides the food for this nation? How do we protect that? And how do we bring relevance? They've been run roughshod over at San Francisco and Los Angeles. Those are the two areas of California that seem to be making the policy for the rest of the state. And when we bring the Central Valley together, all Republican, if you want to run for governor or you want to run for U.S. Senate, you want to run for any statewide office, you're going to have to focus on the issues here in the Valley, on immigration, on farm and ag, on the energy, on all of the things that have been taken from our Central Valley water statewide. Those are major important issues that will have to be addressed because we are now united. And it's exciting. And we've already been able, just in running and continuing to run, make and move the needle on some of these issues.
I want to go ahead and get into topics a little bit more. So, with the federal government, you can potentially have some policy that might help free up regulation. You could have some policy that help actually deal with the border issue. Even though I realize that the president could just have an executive order, nonetheless, it's not lasting. You can have some things to do with crime, though only at the federal level. Where would be your priorities?
Well, and I would say it's not only at the federal level. I'm still a citizen. I'm still a member of the public here.
But you have a bigger voice if you get elected.
I have a bigger voice, and I will, and I do talk about state issues because they affect all of us, and they affect me, and they affect my business here in the Central Valley. These are things that we need to get back to. We can't. You're electing a person, and who is the entirety of that person? What makes them tick? What are their motivations? Why are they doing what they're doing? Is there things in their background that's going to prevent them from actually properly representing the people? Are we electing them, or are we electing a candidate that's been put in front of us by a whole bunch of special interest groups who aren't really beholden to the people? Are they beholden to these groups?
Well, I don't want to talk about Kamala Harris right now.
Well, and even the gentleman I'm running against, his funding comes from outside the valley. But what we can do here in the valley on water, on energy, on really infrastructure, on immigration, there's things that we can do right now in the federal bureaucracy based on already passed law by bringing together agencies and thinking creatively on how to solve some of these issues. And at the same time pass laws, at the same time propose legislation, and really bring together the 435 members, and at least the majority of them, to pass things that are common sense solutions to these problems. Instead of these omnibus bills or these huge, the farm bill, $1.5 trillion farm bill, and shoving in all of these different things. They need to be passed. Those things do work, but we have to start getting back to letting the public, letting the people see what is actually getting passed. What are we actually voting on?
So if it's hundreds or sometimes thousands of pages, people can't see it. You want simpler bills where it's easier to have accountability and understanding of what's happening?
Absolutely. And start holding our elected feet to the fire. This is a privilege to be able to serve the people. And we can't have, and this is the challenge too. A lot of guys, you run for office. I want to go make a change. Well, and I've sat down and I've actually encouraged a lot of people to run for office, and they have run for office because of my encouragement. But I asked them, explain to me what the role of city council is, and how are you going to affect those things? And oftentimes they have no clue or understanding. Well, explain to me how that works. Tell me the role of the city manager. What about the council, the legal counsel for the city? How does that impact your decision to make and change policies? What about moving these forward on construct? And I've had guys who just said, well, I never even knew that. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't even run. My issue was I didn't like what happened when they were doing the sidewalk outside the library, and I thought it was a really expensive construction bill.
Well, and it might have been, but we have an obligation. With all this freedom and liberty comes responsibility.
Exactly.
And I bet you the majority of people have not been to more than one school board meeting. You know, maybe they went once when they were mad, and they haven't been to a city council meeting. I tried to go last night to Clovis. On the door was, we're canceled. But I go regularly, and I speak, and I understand those things, though I don't want to run. Well, but I can encourage others and provide a platform.
Encourage others and show up. And that's the thing is, these should be, the public should be engaged. You
Mm-hmm.
need to be. We need to be engaged in school board meetings. We need to be engaged in city council meetings. We need to be active in our government. Otherwise, the people who show up are the ones who are going to be, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, as the saying goes. And so you end up listening. And it might be a small minority, but they're so active and they're so loud that the people are going to go deal with them. When we have potholes, when we have major issues that aren't even being addressed because this group over here is being very loud. And we need to start getting engaged and teaching people on what the role of government is. And the federal bureaucracy is so massive. When I was in the bureau, there was I can't talk about everything I did, but there was something that we were doing within the intelligence community, and they were, how do we address this certain problem? And I said, well, we should talk to this agency because they have, actually, that's their role, is to do exactly what the problem is. And a group of the people said, we never even heard of that group. Well, that's the problem with a bureaucracy that is so big. And some of these are classified programs, or things that not everyone should know about them, but the professionals in those arenas should actually know that some of these things do exist, so we can actually leverage and use the bureaucracy to do what it's supposed to be doing. And that's the problem, is we have a lot of people, a lot of members who don't really know the bureaucracy. They don't know the agencies. They trust on staff members. And this gets into, how does actually things get done in Washington, D.C.?
Well, staff writes it. Staff makes the decision and tells you what you should do.
And just because somebody gets voted out of office, guess what? Where do you think the chiefs of staff are going to come in? Where do you think all the ledge directors and all the people that make up the Washington, D.C. staff? Just because so-and-so gets voted out, those guys aren't losing their jobs. They'll find and they'll work for the next congressman that comes into place. Or they'll get over to a committee. And that's where you have to take your individual responsibilities. I'm taking this very serious. I get elected, I'm paying attention. And I have the added benefit that I already worked in Washington, D.C., as well as, when I was an agent out of the Los Angeles field office. That is something that most Americans don't think about. How does, not just Schoolhouse Rock, how does a bill become a law? How does it work? How is the sausage made at the sausage factory? And that's where we have to start making change, and we have to have experienced people involved who can continue to move things forward and get onto a moving train, and not just make it stop and then try to figure out how I even ride the train, and then it moves forward.
Well, that's a bigger project. I have a challenge for all the listeners. Can you name the 5 aspects of the First Amendment? I'm not going to tell you. I'm hoping everybody can do that and knows that. That's a really simple one. There's the beginning of the foundations of freedom.
Absolutely. And carry a pocket constitution. I was just speaking at an NRA meeting. They invited me to come in, and I spoke, and there was a great question, and I was able to say, hey, let's pull up that is what's in the Second Amendment. And you had members not even realizing the full aspect of the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. They didn't even know that the militia was mentioned in the Second Amendment. And
this conversation actually leaked beyond there, and I've heard about it from numerous people, so it started a good discussion.
Yeah, and that's what we should be doing, reading our founding documents, knowing when you look at a house, and I talked about how do you we have to compromise. Yes, there can be compromise on certain things, but there's certain things that you can't compromise. And I tell this I did nuclear engineering, nuclear power plants, and did a lot of industrial construction on the electrical side. You can't compromise on your foundation. You can't compromise on your structure. You can compromise on the color of the facility. You can compromise on maybe where some rooms are placed on non-load bearing areas. But there's certain things that we cannot compromise on, and that's the problem. If you don't understand or have even the requisite knowledge on what is our foundations, what is our framework, how do you know what you can or you can't work and compromise on? And that's the problem right now, is our education system is just fundamentally, this is the issues, is faith, education, moral compass, and founding principles. And that needs to be rebuilt. And that's each and every one of us have an individual responsibility for ourselves to do that.
Amen. So, what would be your top three issues? We're down to about 15 minutes.
My top three issues right now focused here in the Central Valley in this district. It's mostly all economic based. It is going to be for ag. We're a very large ag economy here. In the district, we provide 80% of all the stone fruit globally. We have huge ag investments. We do dairy. I grew up in the dairy capital of the world in Tulare. I live in Kingsburg. Married into a multi-generation farming family. You need water, otherwise you can't grow food. We also are expanding in human population. They need water. We need water infrastructure. We need to be able to store it. In the Central Valley of California, we are Saudi Arabia for sustainable fuel. And there is a discussion. A lot of people say we don't want to deal with, sustainable energy or any of those things.
Is that because of the dairy?
It's not just dairy, it's all ag and wood waste. So there's ways that we can end up using our wood waste. Everyone in this nation knows California wildfires and what they've done. The amount of money that is spent annually on dealing with emergency fires and the damage, the loss to communities, getting into properly managing our forests so we're not polluting our entire, frankly, nation when the smoke and dust blows across the planet. How do we manage our forests? How do we deal with ag? How do we have water? How do we have that proper infrastructure? What about the future? Data centers. What we're doing right now is being broadcast and then streamed, and then that takes energy, that takes electricity. We're losing electricity. We're talking about brownouts because they're phasing out energy. They're continuing to reauthorize Diablo nuclear power plant. We need to be increasing in that. It's safe, it's effective, it's clean.
Well, especially the next generation of nuclear is different.
And that's where you have these small modular reactors that can provide resilience to the grid. We're not enriching China with buying solar panels and batteries all made overseas. Let's get back to American made and focused on ingenuity here. So that's energy. And I've done it. I have an expertise in that. It's the future for data centers and technology. It's water, it's infrastructure, it's energy on really reducing the cost of fuel. How do we do that? We export a lot of oil and gas. And why do we do that? Because we don't have the refineries to be able to deal with that type of what we produce here.
And natural gas is one of the cleanest options we have. And those that say we can't have oil, well, we're going to be living in the Stone Age, and the plastic in your car, in your glasses, the packaging of all your food, we're not there yet.
But
there's an innovative group of people that are moving towards something better, but we can't abandon it. We have to gradually transition.
Exactly. We need to be, I've worked with, the DARPA, the Defense, it's an agency for research, it's advanced research and projects. There's advanced technology. Battery storage is actually getting better. So we're seeing advancements in that. Some of these things aren't there. And we can't bankrupt or stop our economy just to go down a pathway. We saw that during the Obama administration with Solyndra, but we still need the investments. Hydrogen technology is incredible, and we can do that here in the Valley, right out of ag. We have oil and gas out of Bakersfield. We can actually produce and have this here. We do it cleaner, under more environmental regulations, safer, higher wages than anywhere else in the world. So we should be increasing that here because we are globally connected.
But Gavin, in his wisdom, is suppressing it.
He is. And why? So we can import it from countries that use modern day slavery and that cost and pollute globally. And that's the problem too, is why is the California Air Resource Board, why are some of these emission standards and carbon footprint not until it gets into the United States do they start really tracking and letting those numbers be included? If we were honest and transparent, we would return to what we're able to do here in the United States. And we are rich here in the Central Valley. We can make our water, we can provide our energy, and we have to get back to creative ways of doing it. And I talk about all these things on our website. And this is just basic economics. Inflation reduction methods. If we're able to reduce electricity costs by 80%, then what happens? Your money stays in your pocket and you get to choose where it goes. Right now, the cost of healthcare, the cost of energy in California, it's unsustainable. I pay more money just to maintain healthcare coverage from me and my family than my mortgage. I don't even. Yeah, and this is a problem. And then we have our employees and all of those things. There needs to be change.
We'll go ahead and take our final break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So final segment, I want to focus on hope and solutions. Now, we've talked about some of those, but what are your favorites? How do you think you're going to make a difference? Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to my tech, who's keeping me on the straight and narrow today. Well, so hope and solutions. Obviously, you hope to be elected, but once you're elected, what solutions are you going to bring? How are you different than what we've currently got?
I think it's night and day. And actually, we were at a town hall yesterday, and I was asked, what's the difference? Everything is different between myself and Jim Costa. There is hope. There is solutions. These are the things that I've been able to do in the private sector, and now how much more will I be able to carry them out as a member of Congress? We see and we saw what happens to fuel prices and energy prices just based on policy. Well, you might not get the infrastructure in today, but what happens to the futures market? It immediately changes. We can start talking about how we change energy prices here in California and start investing in infrastructure that provides grid resilience, security, so we don't have to worry about what happens if some terrorist or organization attacks one of the power plants. That will put us back in the Stone Ages. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that we have clean drinking water. So much of our money and time has not been spent on really protecting the most disadvantaged communities in our own valley. To have access to drinking water, the very basics.
This is an epidemic, so that if my viewers don't know this, a lot of the small towns have water that you absolutely should not be drinking. It's not safe.
They will have to bus it in, and they'll bring it in on in buses, in bottled water, or actual water trucks. We need to be investing not in a $100 billion high-speed rail that's not connecting anything, but actual infrastructure in wastewater and water treatment facilities, protecting our groundwater, providing infrastructure that's going to be able to store the water that we have so it doesn't just flow out into the ocean. There are some really fun projects that I've looked at, and I can't wait to share more when I'm elected and talk about this, that will bring private money in. There's so much that can be done without even government funding. There's so much private money available to do a lot of these projects. It just get out of the way. The bureaucracy, the regulations, the good old boys network has stifled innovation, has stifled progress here in the valley. And that's a problem. And so I believe the rebirth of California is going to happen right here in the Central Valley. Fresno.
Well, if it's going to change, this is the spot.
This is where it's. I talked to some friends. Another guy, he's a high net worth investor and invests in all things all over the world, but came and is involved in an investment in ag here in the Central Valley. And he said he believes and he sees this place as an emerging market. This is an emerging market. If we're able, and should I win this race, that will signal a change. And we are going to see growth, a significant growth. And if we're going to have that growth, we need to have the basics of infrastructure, water, wastewater, energy, data centers. I talked about this a little bit. If we don't have and don't put in a data center here in the Central Valley, right in Fresno County, we are going to fall behind. Data centers are just like, if you don't have roads and railways, if we go back to the beginning, you're a town that's not on the railroad is going to just disappear. a town that's not on a major highway is going to disappear. These are digital roads, and if we don't invest, we are going to fall away. And that is something that we do not have currently. The power companies can't supply the electricity for these data centers. It just won't happen. Car dealerships can't even get electric chargers at their dealerships right now because the energy companies won't allow it. And homeowners who are buying solar and putting on their homes under a NEM 3, this new standard, are what are they doing? They're mortgaging and putting solar onto their homes and buying infrastructure that they're financing this out for the next 20 years. For what? To pay the same thing? And now they're doing true-ups because they've increased these rates. And they're now taking it from your ability to even sell it back. Corporations that have had so much government subsidies are no longer even providing the basic services that the people want and need. And that's where we have to change. And that's what I'm hopeful for, is fixing some of these basic things and things that I have a lifetime of experience actually delivering in the private sector.
Insurance is a big one that doesn't get talked about.
Oh, yeah.
California is losing insurance. We're not the only state, but our companies are fleeing because we're not taking care of business and because of some of our regulations. How could you influence that?
Well, not just in insurance, tort reform needs to happen. And that's going to be, how do we reduce healthcare costs? Insurance, there is no benefit for an insurance company. It's basically California sucking the money out of insurance companies. And we have to deal with that. There has to be some changes, and that's some state issues have to change here. I can't tell you. I was just somebody ran into my car just last week. Fortunately, they had insurance. I know so many people who are involved in accidents and collisions, uninsured motorists. It's a burden on everyone who's driving when there's other people who are involved in accidents who don't have insurance. Why? Insurance companies are leaving. You can't get home insurance up in the forest anymore. Mm-hmm. Fire insurance. What are we doing? We've taken away an entire industry. There's an industry that wants to be able to provide insurance. The problem is not in California, because the California government has found a way to destroy an industry based on incompetence. And that's just that.
Now, before I forget, I want to make sure that you give some contact information.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, my website is just my name. It's Michael Maher, Maher, like Bill Maher, but Moore Center Politics. And then all of my social media is on that website, just Michael Maher, Maher.com.
Okay. Well, we're down to 2 minutes. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. This is an important election. And if anything, the people who have listened or watched the show, may they come to the thought and realization, nothing is going to change unless you start up and make a change in your own life. Wake up, make your bed. That's Admiral McRaven talked about that. You got to get up and do the basics. Be responsible for what God has given you the authority over and the responsibility over, and then start going and seeing how you can make change. Engage your neighbors. Start having conversations with people that you meet in the grocery store, at the gas station. We can change. People are starving for human interaction. They're just waiting for somebody else to make that first step. By love, serve one another. And that's really what I see this race. We have more Democrats and independents voting for a very conservative candidate than any other congressional race in the Central Valley. Why? Because a lot of them say, I believe what you're saying is true. And I trust that you're going to do what you're saying you're going to do. And I disagree on some of the other social issues, but what's affecting us right now has nothing to do with party politics. And if we're able to do that, individually hold ourselves responsible and start engaging, voting, and electing people who have the best intentions, we will change. This country will turn around.
So you're still hopeful?
Oh, I'm very hopeful. I'm actually bullish on the future of this nation. I truly am.
There's a lot of people out there. I believe you're right. I believe that we have to find our place, do the work, and civically engage, but we can change this country. That's what I also want to listen to is folks. Well, change yourself, get your life to influence others, get your life to change your community. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550